Hello there. Our next project is going to be sort of a mini project that's going to help lead us toward what we're going to do with clay. So get ready. Clay is coming up. But we're going to learn about textures first. So we've already talked about texture a little bit with the collagraph prints, but texture is the feel, appearance, or consistency of a surface. Basically, everything has a texture. It's whatever's on the outside of it, and sometimes it can be a texture that's rough or smooth, things like that. Often the texture is something that you can see, but maybe if you reached out and touched it, you wouldn't actually feel it. What we're going to be doing for this next project is translating the textures of objects onto paper by drawing. Here are some textures that were drawn. On the left, those were all made with a pencil. On the right, those were made with a pen. But when you're drawing texture, you're translating. You're looking at an object and you're deciding, okay, how can I take what I'm seeing with my eyes on this three-dimensional object and translating it into a two-dimensional drawing using my pencil? That's what we're going to start doing for the very beginning of all of this, and we're going to work our way up to being able to build 3D textures, which is what we will do when we start with the clay part. Now, drawing textures is two-dimensional because it's flat on paper, but building up texture three-dimensionally, that is a little bit different. It's sort of a different part of your brain that's working, and some of you are going to really thrive with the 3D textures, and some of you, that might be the part that's a little more challenging for you. That's why we're going to start with drawing textures, and then we're going to end up building them three-dimensionally. This image on the left was all ceramic clay textures. So a person made each of those textures using their hands with clay. On the right here, this was all made with cardboard, all glued together and cut up into tiny pieces. Pretty cool, right? Okay, we're going to spend the next 2 days drawing textures. So you'll need a sheet of paper, and then you could work with a pencil for this or pens. Either one works. I'm going to let you decide. So on your paper, you're going to make 4 different textures, and you're going to draw them onto the paper. We're spending 2 days on this, so I would suggest make 2 textures today, 2 textures tomorrow. We're going to turn the whole thing in tomorrow. How big do the textures need to be? Look at your hand. Your palm is this part. That's how big of a space you need to put on your paper for each of these textures. You could keep it super simple and make squares. So I could make a big square and then divide it into quarters so that I have squares that are like this. So that would be the sort of more simple way to do this. Each square is about the size of my hand. You could also get more fancy with it if you want, as long as the shapes that you are making are about the size of your hand. That is what we are going for. So here I've got some more interesting shapes, as long as they're about as big as your palm. And then you're going to find an object that has texture. Here's some string. There's a texture to this, and you're going to study the texture. This is a texture study. So how can you take the texture of all of this string and translate it, because it's 3D, onto a two-dimensional surface? So decide, pen or pencil, and then you're going to draw that texture into your first square. Find another texture, figure out how are you going to take the texture of that object and translate it into a drawing. Later this week, we're going to start building textures using objects that will be three-dimensional, but we're starting here with drawing textures. This is not a rubbing, so don't set your paper on top of it and do a rubbing. That is wrong. We did that with the collagraph prints. So now we're taking it up to the next level by actually translating a three-dimensional thing into a two-dimensional drawing. Here's your to-do list. Find a sheet of paper and either a pen or a pencil. Divide your paper into 4 sections that are about the size of your palm, and then spend the next 2 days drawing a different texture inside of each of those pieces. So here you can see 3 different examples of some drawings that show 4 different textures. Our end goal is to learn how to make these textures into actual 3-dimensional textures that you can feel using different materials, and our end goal is to make cool textures out of clay. Try not to copy these exactly. Be inspired by them for sure, but try not to copy them exactly. Find some textures that you have around your house.